I saw a great post that on your Facebook profile that you said that regarding the responsibility to every people regarding the Torah, right? The Torah does not apply the same to every single person. So, what do you believe? And basically, this message for the Hispanic community out there that thinks that they are required to observe the entirety of the Torah. What is your application of the Torah regarding Gentile believers, Act 15, and all of this?
Okay, so first of all, it is fundamentally physically impossible for any human being to obey all of the Torah commandments. Even Yeshua did not obey all of the Torah commandments because Yeshua was a male, so he didn't observe any of the commandments dealing with females. He was not a Levite or a Cohen, so he did not observe those things that were for Levites and Cohen. He was not a soldier. He didn't do the laws for soldiers. He wasn't a farmer. He didn't do the laws for farmers, and so on. So when it comes to observance of Torah, the key is, who are you? And then what Torah commands are applicable to you, and what Torah commandments are applicable to you where you are. For instance, when we observe Pesach in the United States, we're doing a memorial celebration because we're not in Israel. We cannot do a Passover sacrifice. It has to be done according to Deuteronomy 16. The Passover sacrifice has to be done in Jerusalem. We're not doing that. So the best we're doing is observing a memorial or a remembrance, looking forward to next year in Jerusalem, looking forward to the time when we would do that. Likewise, the Shemitah, we can't celebrate the Shemitah outside of Israel. It's a commandment that says when you're in the land, you will do this. So where are you? What are you? Where are you living? Who are you? What do you do? So all of those things affect how we observe the mitzvot. Now, Acts 15 says that there are 4 items that it says Gentiles needed to abide by. All 4 of those had to do with pagan worship, pagan rituals. And so they were things that had to be, in order for Jewish people who were, while there was a temple standing, to be able to fellowship with non-Jewish people while there was a temple standing, they could not become contaminated by the unclean in a sanctified sense. Mm-hmm. Not that Gentiles were unclean in the humanity sense or lesser human beings, but because of the uncleanliness as in sanctification, they could not relate to those. So those 4 things that Acts 15 says are things that deal with contact, within relationship, within fellowship. And in order for Gentiles to be able to worship in the same synagogue as the Jews, they had to abstain from those things. So they did not contaminate the Jews or desanctify them, so that they would not then be able to go to the temple and perform the rituals that they had to at the temple. But it goes on to say, for you will hear Moses taught in the synagogue every Shabbat. So there is an expectation that Gentiles will be in synagogue on Shabbat hearing Moses taught. And remember, when we say they will hear Moses, that isn't that Moses wrote a separate book from the Torah. You know, it's not like there's the Torah and then there's what Moses wrote. This is what Moses wrote down at the command of God, which we know as the Torah. So the Gentiles would hear the words of Torah, and then they would apply those words that applied to them, to their life, to their walk, and abide by them. So there are commandments that are for everybody. It doesn't matter who you are. There's commandments. Just as in the United States, we have a constitution. The Constitution applies to everybody. But then there's separate laws that apply, for instance, if you are an attorney, or if you're a merchant, or if you're, when you're driving. You know, there's laws for different types of trucks. If you drive a big rig, you have to have a different license than if you drive a car. So, but yet, whether you drive a car or a big rig, the speed limit applies to you the same. So you have to have a different license to drive different vehicles, but they both have to drive the speed limit the same. Likewise, Jewish people have commandments that are attributed only to them in certain cases. For instance, in order to be a Cohen, you had to be of Israelite descent. So the laws to Kohanim are significantly restricted to just what we would call Jewish people. And remember, we had the children of Abraham, the Israelites, the Hebrew people, and then the Jewish people. all the same group of people. So we're not delineating. So when we talk about the Jews, we're talking about the people from the nation of Judah, not from the tribe of Judah. And at the time when the nation of Judah became called the people, the Jewish people, there were people from all of the tribes there, not just Judah and Benjamin and half a Levite, but the northern kingdom had been dispersed. Many of those people came down to the southern kingdom, and all of those people were called the Jewish people, not just the tribe of Judah. So all of those things are applicable and important for us to know when we're applying these things. Also, it's important to note that a Gentile can observe any commandment he wants to. The question is he obligated to? In other words, in the United States, we build sukkot. We build temporary dwelling places. However, the commandment says when you go in the land, do this. So in the United States, technically, we don't have to build sukkahs, but we can, to abide by something that is remembering and memorializing and being a part of without an obligation to. And so there are certain things that Gentiles can do that they're not necessarily obligated to do, but it's okay for them to do if they choose to. But ultimately, there is one Torah. It's how we divide the Torah up relationally to different people, men, women, children, parents, and so on. Governors, government, priesthood, all those things are different.
Baruch Hashem, yes, I totally agree with you, Rabbi. And this is basically what we're dealing with. And I know that not specifically in the Spanish-speaking community, but worldwide. And then it's this growing movement that's called Hebrew Roots movements, where these people believe that they're part of the lost tribes of Israel. What are your thoughts, or what can you tell us about this confusing movement that's growing in these days?
Well, first of all, there's no such thing as lost tribes. For two reasons. One is, if you read in the Brit Chadashah, the tribes of Israel are mentioned in the book of Acts. They knew where these people were. They weren't lost. Number two, the scripture says, if a woman marries a man who's a Gentile, their children are Gentile. Now, we have today where that changed. In Israel, they say if your mother or your father is Jewish, you're Jewish, if your grandparents are. But biblically, the tribe and the lineage go through the man. So if a Gentile woman married a Jewish man or an Israelite man, the children were Israelite. But if a Gentile woman married a Jewish woman married a Gentile man, their children were Gentiles. So if that happens enough, the people will say in the Hebrew Roots movement that, my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was Jewish, or my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother was Jewish, but then they intermarried, but I have this little trace of Jewish blood within me, so I'm a lost tribe of Israel. According to the scripture, that's not so. Now, that doesn't diminish the value of people. And that's important. Because I'm Jewish, that doesn't make me a better person than a non-Jewish people. Jewish people were only called to do two things. One, to preserve the oracles of God, and two, to be a light to the nations. Why were they a light to the nations? To attract the nations to the oracles of God. It has never been God's plan for there to be separate community. In other words, Abraham and Sarah were Gentiles. They became Ivrit. They crossed over. They became the first Hebrews. They have a son. That son is a Hebrew, but he needs a bride. So what do? They go across. They get a bride. They bring her back across so she becomes part of Abraham's family, part of the Hebrew people. Time goes on. You have Jacob. Jacob has his sons. Those sons marry some Gentiles, some within Israel. They go into Egypt. They come out of Egypt. The mixed multitude comes out of Egypt with the Israelite people. They all stand before God and enter covenant together, both those that were natural-born descendants and those that were of the nations. When Israel finally goes into the promised land, they're led into the promised land by Joshua, who was an Israelite, and Caleb, who was a Kenizzite. One Jew, one non-Jew, that led Israel into the promised land. It has always been Jewish people and non-Jewish people serving together, different roles, different responsibilities, one family. It always has been. And so when you look for that drop of Hebrew blood. If I go back 20 generations, there was a drop of blood. You're focusing on the wrong blood. The blood that redeems us is the blood of Messiah. I am not redeemed because my blood is Jewish blood, because my genetics. I'm redeemed because of what Yeshua did. My purpose is to share Yeshua with everybody, regardless of their blood, so that his blood can make them new creations. And when we quit looking for the endless genealogy, when we quit looking for that validation of identity, when Gentile people understand that God didn't drop them in the wrong basket, he didn't make a mistake and whoops, you were supposed to be in the Jewish basket. I say there's a syndrome among Jewish roots or Hebrew roots people. It's called transjutilism. It's when Gentiles believe they were born in the wrong body or the wrong genealogy. You're not. If you were born a Gentile, God did not make a mistake and you were dropped in the wrong basket. He created you ideally and perfectly to be who you are so that you would function in the role of a non-Jewish believer to bring Jewish people and non-Jewish people into the kingdom. And Jewish people are not given extra special benefits. We're not better people. We're not, none of those things. Look at the history of the Jewish people. We are the most stiff-necked and rebellious people in the history of the world. And we're not better because we're Jewish. We're different. Just like men aren't better than women, we're different. And so it's important. If your study is to find a drop of Jewish blood, you're wasting your time. Your study should be to find Yeshua's blood, the blood of the Lamb.
Amen. Definitely, that Rabbi. That's basically the gospel right there, and the importance of preaching the gospel versus try to find that Jewish blood in us. And